you actually assure the quality of products in a meaningful way. What are all these labels that we're reading about, this product being organic, that product being top quality, and so on? What data substantiates it, and how can the consumers or different participants in the supply chain have the assurance that the data you can trust, what it says in the package? The third aspect that's actually linked to the first two is traceability. Know where something came from, whether it's the food, what region it's imported from, or the products that if a product leaves port A, it goes to the port B, you can be certain that the product you're receiving in port B is what actually left port A. And then tying all together into this is the supply chain efficiency. Doing product recalls or simply tracking your assets in real time is a challenge that's been elusive for the industry to solve. It costs tens of billions of dollars to companies, and at the same time finding the right solutions to solve them is challenging. In many companies, the #1 investments in supply chain has been about automating the processes and making them more efficient, but at the same time, a lot of processes are not streamlined properly. So the problem itself is multidimensional. So I outlined the basic thing for you. It's about trust of products, but when you dig deeper, you can see how many different issues and dimensions there are in this problem. So before I move on to the specifics, just a brief kind of insights into what we are and what we do. So Ambrosus is an end-to-end blockchain-based solution that assures quality origins of products. The main components with which we do it is, the first one is actually data storage. So it's assuring that the data integrity is there and that you can use it meaningfully in supply chain management. How the data is collected is also important. So we look at solutions to connect APIs to sensors and to build protocols that allow you to actually verify the data at the source. That's very important because if the blockchain can allow you to store the data securely and it's stored there forever, that's great. But what if you cannot trust the data itself? What's the point of storing it forever? So that's the important question for us and for many others to solve. The third aspect is creating solutions for data sharing. So at this stage, there is a lot of data silos. There is a lot of basically compartments with data, but there is no efficient mechanisms to exchange it. A lot of them are basically, it's the reality of the industry that it's very difficult to have large volumes of data exchanged efficiently. And this is where we develop different sandboxes and tools to allow community-driven applications. It's very important. The very important element in what Ambrosus does is harnessing the power of the community, especially developers, engineers, and different people who can come up with crazy or interesting or valuable proposals and just try and build on the open source solutions that we build, or they can actually pitch the idea to us, and we take a very open approach to experimentation. And finally is taking all that knowledge and taking all these experimental things and building industry-specific apps. So Ambrosus works with a number of large companies, specifically on solving the issues of traceability or quality assurance for them. And by running these pilot projects, by engaging with the corporates, we have gained very good insights about what their needs are. On top of the experience of the team, we've also just, running the actual pilots has been a very useful experience because things can work nicely in theory, and then you do them in practice, it all doesn't work. So that's also something that helps us all together to build something that creates value for the industry. And there is no magic bullet that we can create. There is no one perfect app that will solve all the problems. But as long as individual tools that Ambrosus builds can help solve some particular issues of the supply chain or help one particular industry, then it's already a great benefit to the society and to the economy. So the basic three elements where we add value is innovation, basically using the most recent technology stacks and innovation, coupling it with performance, so trying to optimize different processes, and finally creating trust. So overall, there is no kind of good process to immediately leapfrog into the whole decentralization. People like to talk about it, oh, we're going to make everything decentralized. Things don't work like that. So we take a gradual approach where we can actually build the useful solution, but then over some time, maybe in a couple of years, we want to make the system entirely autonomous so that people wouldn't have to trust even people building the solution, that it would be so transparent and community developed that it can just be there and there is no particular authority to trust. but we're still in the process of building that solution. So in terms of data management, so this particular use case, I decided to use it as an example from what we're doing with farmers. So basically, the aspects of data collection, we work with a number of existing sensors. So we just look at what's out there in the market and how we can, how our platform can connect to those. And then on the other side, also about the integration of ERPs and different dashboards, so the software that companies are using processes. So importantly, Ambrosus is not trying to compete with this. We're trying to simply provide the relevant data for them and to provide the network backbone that these software solutions could integrate in. And in terms of the Ambrosus network itself, it's all about data management, how to authenticate different users and objects, and how to create the digital storage and serialization. So these are some of the key challenges we're tackling. And creating identity, different supply chains or different products may need different levels of how deep you go. So maybe you're just interested at the shipping container level, or maybe you're actually interested going back to the individual product level. Currently, it's a little bit price dependent. So obviously, if you want to go all the way to the final product, that's quite costly because especially if you're using the public network, of course, each object you create, there are transactions associated with it and so on. So economically, it's currently only feasible for high-value products, but there are a lot of pharmaceutical products that cost thousands of dollars. So for example, for them, even the individual level of tracing would be applicable, whereas for some bigger, for some lower value goods or for just bigger transactions, you can do it at the level of pallets and shipping containers. So again, it's a challenge both on the technology level, but also on the economics level in terms of optimizing the costs and finding the right value for the stakeholders. And in terms of different means for data collection, so what are the sources for the quality of objects that we're dealing with? So the first one is market identification. You have to have some way to identify the product, whether it's some sort of an RFID tag or NFC, a tracer, or a barcode of a sort. The second aspect is how do you assess the quality of that object? There are two main parameters used for quality, internal and external. External is maybe temperature, humidity, pressure. Internal is the actual composition of the product. And when these parameters have been gathered through different means, I will not go into details of the kinds of sensors we're using. So just these two aspects are then linked to the particular product. So you want to know the full history of the product from its birth all the level to delivery and final consumption. Then there is an element of integrity assurance, and that comes actually to the hardware element. Is very often you also need to look at the packaging to make sure that the contents of the packaging are not replaced. So this is the additional element where Ambrosus is specialized in. I will not go too much into detail because it's a bit outside of the general scope of the program here. But importantly, currently at least, you do need to combine several different technologies in order to provide solutions for the supply chains. And finally, all that data it has to be transmitted in some way and to be recorded on the blockchain. So we're using different means, GSM, Wi-Fi, or RFID, again, depending on the supply chains. I would say that one challenge with supply chains is that almost none of them are the same. So there are definitely some similarities, and there are many processes that are fairly similar. But at the same time, for individual products, or categories of products, you have individual challenges, so you always have to kind of tweak your system a little bit. But we've already come up with a few aspects where we can generalize it to all the industries. So at the basic level, it's about data sharing, and could use maybe a handheld device or maybe other sorts of sensors in order to simply ask the system, okay, tell me about this product. And then we're currently using Ethereum and IPFS as the backbone for processing of data and transactions and storage, and just tell them, what happened at what time throughout the whole process. And if need be, you go deeper into this. I will give you more practical examples down the line. And in terms of origins of products, also simply knowing what process took place in what area and who was responsible for it. So if there is any quality problem, you want to know, did the problem happen at the level when the product left the factory and was distributed? Or did the problem actually occur at the sourcing stage? So you have to look more at the suppliers and so on. So there are basically black boxes at each of these spots. You always have parts where you don't know the full history of what's happening and you want to find out more. And the key questions are, how to find this, and in the end, how to give the consumers, people who are consuming these products in the end, the full confidence into the whole process, and to allow them to actually know what it is that they're consuming. So that's it's a pretty big challenge over there. So the usage of smart contracts to solve this is, in our opinion, particularly paramount. So we look at the main aspects that the smart contracts provide you, which is visibility, enforceability, verifiability, and privacy. Interestingly, the visibility and privacy ones are somewhat incompatible with each other, so that's one of the basic challenges that we're tackling right now. Because on the one hand, the end consumer needs to have full insights into the product to trust it. On the other hand, the companies don't want the details to be fully public. So you have to find kind of some middle ground to provide both benefits, but there are ways to you can just focus on the quality aspects and not reveal the commercially sensitive elements of the deals. But compared to the traditional contract law, of course, the benefits of smart contracts is that they're fast. So you basically have a real-time audit of your quality on the supply chain. You don't have to wait for quality assurance experts to check it and find a problem, or you don't have to wait until you already have a disaster. Because if the company that produces, for example, food, discovered that there was contamination in the food, the recall process is very painful and expensive. It can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. In the case of a multinational corporation, can take weeks to do it, and very often you have to manually search through all the distributors to find out, okay, where what products went, and you don't actually know for sure which ones of them are actually contaminated and dangerous and which ones are not. So each company has a very painful choice between either we just recall everything, and then the chances are you're recalling a lot of normal products of good quality, or the other choice is not to do a full recall, but then risk that somebody else will have a food poisoning or otherwise will have issues. And these are both unpleasant options to choose from. The other aspects are, of course, that they reduce the transaction costs and they are self-executing, which is also fairly important. That if you have a deal that is conditional upon certain quality requirements, and those requirements are fulfilled, then actually the contract executes it and you have a lot less scope to argue, or you have less scope for one party abusing the system, because if the information clearly says that everything has been fulfilled, then the contract is executed. If some quality assurance parameters are not achieved, then you get the reimbursement immediately. As soon as the data records something is wrong, you get the money back. So that's also an important element in terms of all the big disputes that take place in the supply chains. Anti-counterfeiting, I'll skip. It's more of a hardware issue that we're specialized in. If somebody's interested later on, of course, we're happy to talk about this. The role of token in our system is, this is still being developed. So currently it doesn't have that functionality, but the ultimate utility for Amber that we're building is that it serves as a data bonded token. What this means is that it becomes a sort of a digital certificate for the product, both a birth certificate and kind of like medical life or a history of life of the product, so that you could actually link the token to a product at the production stage or at the sourcing stage if necessary. And then as the product travels through the supply chain, more and more data about the product is attached to it. And then in the end, when the consumers receive the product, they receive it together with a token, but there is also data associated with that token. So there is both the value in the data itself, and then there is also the benefit for the end customers that they know what they're consuming. And you can also, we've already come up with a bunch of different, nice use cases you can get with that. For example, if an insurance company wants to premiums to people who consume healthy products, they can actually offer some kind of loyalty points to the people, or when you claim your token, you get some kind of a premium on your insurance, and then if you consume enough healthy food, you get some financial benefits from that. So there are a number of nice additional use cases that can be built on top of this. And solutions such as different marketplaces, so a variety of services that we've Some of these are already built and they exist as demos or alpha versions. Some of these are still at the level of being implemented. But you can have a real-time inventory management using IoT, so for companies to manage their warehouses, to source their products and so on. You can have smart insurance solutions based on real sensor data. So with insurance claims in supply chains, the basic question is all the time, okay, if you want to to resolve a dispute, you got to know what was the truth. And in our case, we propose sensors as being the source of truth. And that, of course, is another challenge on the hardware side. But overall, resolving insurance claims using data from sensors. Alternatively, you could have solutions for serializations and label printing so that companies manufacturing products could simply serialize the products and have more or less like a database of available products on the blockchain. Or you could have different loyalty programs or even kind of consumer-oriented apps that can even kind of take the information about the nutrition of food and link it to either a personal preferences and so on. And we have, and of course, the data that's generated in the supply chain, you can use it for different analytical tools, etc. So the amount of different use cases and apps you can build on this is enormous. And we have different groups kind of building different solutions using these parts, and many of these we haven't even discovered. I'm sure there are hundreds of different other valuable use cases that can be built. And how do we try, like what are the key aspects of the philosophy that we implement? So we build open source solutions, so all the tools, the protocols and APIs we develop, as soon as they're finished, we open source them. So we're not afraid of other people using it or kind of even editing it in other projects. That's in the spirit of the whole community. We've also reused a lot of other people's work and so on, which was open sourced. And importantly, it doesn't necessarily decrease the value of Ambrosus network, because the more people discover how many different benefits there are, the more incentivized they are to continue using it. So being can actually be to your advantage. Second, it's the information protection. So putting security aspects at also the core of your value proposition. Flexibility is important because new regulations on data storage are coming very frequently, and there are a lot of requirements, especially in the food and pharma industries. That's a particular reality in Europe. And then importance of having a solution that's end-to-end. So a lot of companies, they want you to have basically a possibility to plug into all sorts of software that already exists, legacy systems, etc. That's currently very difficult when using decentralized solutions, when using anything from the so-called Web3. So it's still early days and there are a lot of things to do. And in order to make that faster, you need more developers building. So that's the fifth value coming here, how to make kind of developer-friendly tools. These are still being built, and I will get back to this, what we're providing for the BIOTS hackathon in terms of the tools, so we'll have a lot more details on that. And finally, having the expertise in the IoT sense. Most of the blockchain companies in general kind of just specialize in the blockchain. Now it's changing. You have more companies that do convergence. But we, from the very outset, we said blockchain on its own will not be able to solve these problems. It's a combination of different technologies. In this case, IoT and blockchain is where we can also make a difference. And some more practical examples. So this was one of our first use cases where you can simply have a QR example representing a steak, and then by scanning it, you get an overview of these solutions. We have a detailed demos of video on our YouTube channel. It looks just like a basic interface, but under the hood, there is actually, all of these are readings on the blockchain, and all of these you can program, okay, if something was wrong here, you get a 20% discount or you get a reimbursement of money, and here if something is wrong, basically what happens after if is up to you to program, and it's fairly, you have a lot of different solutions. So once you get an insight, you can see, you can set up particular ranges for kind of what are the requirements for you, and you can, we had a use case with olive oil where we could assure where the olives come from without tracing the olives. So we didn't really care physically about tracking the olives, just at the point where they arrived to the factory, we could measure certain chemical parameters, and those that they came from a particular, in this case from Toscana in Italy. So from that perspective, finding clever solutions to complex problems
blockchain is simply helpful by storing the data is also something that is an interesting use case in supply chain management. Another use case we've developed is a peer-to-peer quality marketplace. This one is running actually. You can use it with Parity or MetaMask, and the whole marketplace is open sourced. Basically what it allows you to create is anybody can create products, but importantly it's not only what you're selling and for how much, but also the quality aspects. So you can only get the money for your product if the quality parameters you set are actually confirmed by the sensors upon delivery. So it has a bit of an escrow model in that case, and we're still working on actually implementing these quality techniques to different kinds of products. Currently, from the legal perspective, that's still to be made. So on the technical level, we've made it. On the legal, it's always more complicated. So that's what we're working on. Because a lot of people said, hey, it's great, I can sell drugs like this. So that's why we had a bit of problems. So we're not officially releasing it because it allows you to kind of sell high quality drugs too, but we don't endorse that. And another solution is quality short commodities market, but I will not go into too much details. Just briefly about the ecosystem we're coming in, we're closely part of the Ethereum ecosystem. So we're part of the Ethereum Alliance. Parity Technologies is our core technology partner. So we work together also with the Parity team, which includes Gavin Wood, who co-founded Ethereum and invented Solidity, amongst other things, and a bunch of different associations that Ambrosus has been working with or being supported by. A large part of our team is based at EPFL Innovation Park, so we're from the sister University of ETH Zurich, but recently we've also started being active here. We have Professor Roger Wattenhofer from Distributed Computing Lab who has joined us as solutions architect. So we're kind of spreading all over Switzerland and Europe as well. That's a bit about our team, which is growing very fast and expanding and hiring more people. And just a couple of points on the challenge that we've been proposing. So it's on the pharma vertical. The problem that we're interested in solving is, as I've explained to you through the presentation, you've probably realized that monitoring and recording all the activities is a fairly complex thing, but at the same time it's required by the regulations. So you have a regulatory framework and complex ways to record data. Data is very often kind of split and fragmented, and a lot of the relationships in supply chains, in particular in pharma, but in many of them is still paper-based, so you don't have any kind of digitalization. Sometimes it's still, you still have a guy actually working with a piece of paper and ticking the boxes. And of course, as a result, you have different problems such as delays, risks to quality of products. You don't have the exact information or insights, and you may have lengthy disputes thanks to having just an outdated model of contracts, and contracts take long to enforce. So if you have any dispute, you may have months or maybe even years to resolve this. So there is a more detailed document, I think, that's been distributed to you, but the basic areas where we're interested, the challenge that we're proposing for BIOTS in the pharma vertical is using blockchain. We specifically work with Ethereum to have kind of automatic send orders to suppliers for raw ingredients. The second aspect that could be, it's all part of the same possibly solution, but just to give 3 different elements. The second one is how you can use that to have a real-time track and trace for every order, and in particular making use of the escrows. So that's the interesting model that allows you to come up with creative economic incentives for participants to play nice. And finally, how do you actually have the smart contract-based calculation and settlement of final payments? So if sensors tell you, okay, I have generated this and that information about the product, how do you, for example, transform that into an economic value? How do you calculate that? And how do you eventually kind of have dynamic pricing of the product? So that's an interesting challenge. We've actually worked on a number of issues like that, so we'll be able to give our inputs, but it's still a fascinating problem of, for example, you have a meat being delivered and then something happens, the meat spoils on the way, and the restaurant ordered it from you, and the restaurant says, well, now we have the information, the meat is no longer good for us, we don't accept it, and you're stuck with a truckload full of meat that maybe was at the wrong temperature for a couple of hours, and then maybe there is a dynamic solution that allows, there is a company producing food for dogs, for example, and for them it's acceptable quality because the meat is not spoiled these lines, there are a number of challenges that can also reduce food waste, or in case of pharma, to similarly have actually solutions where it doesn't apply to all kinds of medicine. So for vaccine, it's definitely not a solution, but for others, how do you actually use kind of quality as a price mechanism determination? So that's a brief introduction about us. Tomorrow, our Chief Product Officer, Dr. Vlad Trifa, will be also presenting IoT and blockchain tooling, I think in this room actually at 3:45 p.m. So for those of you who are interested to kind of dig deeper into the tools we're using to solve these problems, you're welcome to join. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Angel. You say Angel, not Angel, right? Angel. So we have another company presentation coming up right now with Dr. Stefan Weber. He's also a physicist, another physicist, but not right now. He's the COO of Modum and trying to marry IoT and blockchain. And while you're connecting your computer, let's have a little survey here. So how many physicists are in the room? There are a few physicists. Seems to be the physicist corner over there. Mathematicians, also a few. Electrical engineers. Whoa, there are a lot of engineers. Wow, interesting. Anybody from social sciences?